Hello and welcome. Today we are going to look at a video by Howard Ho, and this video is about the song We Don't Talk About Bruno from Encanto. So his take on this song doesn't just have to do with the music. We're going to look a little bit at what he has to say about the whole song, but I'm going to kind of just focus on what he says about the music and just give my thoughts about his takes on things. So go ahead, grab a cup of tea or a gourd or whatever you're drinking and join me.
We Don't Talk About Bruno is a madrigal. Welcome to Howard Ho Music, and if you're new to the channel, we do talk about musical theater and music theory behind some of your favorite shows and songs, which right now means basically anything Lin-Manuel Miranda is behind. So naturally, our latest obsession is Disney's Encanto, which features Lin's signature musical and storytelling sophistication. We have to discuss everything that makes this song so amazing. First of all, yes, it's a song sung by the Madrigal family, but in a way, it's also a type of modern madrigal. So what is a madrigal? Well, it's a type of choral piece that had its heyday in the Renaissance. It was known for being polyphonic, meaning many sounds, or in this case, many voices. Each voice is singing a slightly different melody, creating a sense of a tapestry where every voice is like a thread that weaves into a larger whole. And the epic ending of the song We Don't Talk About Bruno combines all the melodies we previously heard in the song into a glorious Madrigal family madrigal. To be clear, they're not exactly singing a madrigal, which is usually sung a cappella and is through composed, meaning there are no repeated sections, but the idea that they are singing a madrigal is useful in giving us some insight into the story, which we will get to in due time. In writing
Okay, so let's talk about this. He is basing basically the whole video is this madrigal idea. So it's the family madrigal, and he's saying that in this song they're singing a madrigal. However, it's a little confusing because he kind of already undermines his argument by stating that it's not actually a madrigal because it's not a cappella and it's not through composed. He's like, but besides all that, and he tries to also kind of like differentiate it by saying it's a modern madrigal. But besides all that, his argument is that looking at this piece like a madrigal gives us some sort of important context, right? So we can kind of determine something about the family by using this kind of like madrigal framework, okay? So let's see what he has to say about that, because if we look at like a 16th century madrigal, which is the most recent, because there's also like 13th century madrigals. So like which madrigal is he trying to compare it to? I would assume the one that's kind of soonest to time to us. Then like there really are no overlaps. Like madrigals are through composed, meaning there's a new line of music for every line of like a poem, with the idea being that the music would convey the emotion of that line of the poem. That's why it was through composed. So listening to all of these people kind of bring their musical ideas together at the end and overlap them, that doesn't follow anything of like the madrigal way of writing music. And like he said, oh, well, it's polyphonic. And at the end, when you have all these different independent ideas on top of one another, that is polyphonic. But there's also like from the time of the madrigal, there's polyphonic masses, you know, there's other polyphonic works. So it's like he's excluding certain things from what makes a madrigal. And the one thing that he's latched onto is that it's polyphonic, but polyphonic isn't exclusive to a madrigal. So already, and I think he even kind of admits it here with how he says, oh, it's a modern madrigal, it doesn't have these kind of things. Already his argument is kind of weak for determining this as a madrigal. But like he said, it is a useful framework. So let's see how he uses this framework to explain like some sort of insight into the song and into the movie.
this song, Lin says he was inspired by A Weekend in the Country from Sondheim's A Little Night Music, and also Jonathan Larson's It's Beginning to Snow from Rent. This type of overlapping melody tapestry is one of the greatest things about musical theater. Going back to opera,
harmony.
The basic technique is to compose different melodies that can fit all over the same chord progression. In this case, it's this repeated bass line, which is syncopated in this montuno rhythm.
Okay, so he gives some examples of musicals that have a similar overlapping kind of tapestry of voices. But then he doesn't call those things madrigals. He's not saying, oh, well, see, the madrigal has been like a part of music theater. He's just showing that this is a common kind of music theater idea, music theater trope, and it's being used again in a musical, right, film that takes from music theater. So again, I don't really see the connection between a madrigal and this being like the music theater trope. Like, to me, they're just separate things. So let's continue listening and see what he has to say.
A traditional Cuban rhythm that was a precursor to salsa. Syncopated means the notes are happening between the beats, giving it this real danceable energy, emphasizing the and of each beat. But within this danceable energy, each melody has to delicately fit with the others so that each one gets its turn to shine and be heard. Kind of like how every family member has their own role to play in the madrigal family, just like the singers in a choir singing a madrigal. Lin is literally creating a madrigal. It's a wonderful play on words, and of course, the name madrigal wasn't just chosen for being a musical reference.
Please,
Okay, so this is a great statement, right? We are creating a family madrigal. Like, that is such a cool statement. And this kind of seems to be his argument for most of the video. It's kind of the one that keeps on coming back. The thing is whenever you have an argument like this, like I've seen it before in my own research and when other people, like I was taking a research class, you would come up with an idea that you really liked, like a hypothesis, right? And it's like, okay, I think it's supposed to be like, oh, I think this piece is a family madrigal. Now I have to prove it. And so far, he hasn't proved it. But it's like he really, really wants this to be a thing. And the problem is no matter how much you want it, sometimes it's just not there. And I think that's what's happening in this video. He came up with this really cool idea, and now he's trying to stretch the meaning of what a madrigal is to prove his point. But I don't really think that, I don't think he has enough evidence to call it a madrigal yet. But we're still holding on to that cliffhanger about, well, the madrigal framework can help explain the family, explain something, right? It's useful when we're looking at this movie. So let's hold off. Let's see what he has to say about that. Oh, he also says that each member of the family has a role to play. Like each singer has a role in a madrigal, but that could be true of anything. That could be true if you were a sports team or if you were some sort of other ensemble. So I don't think that kind of oh, you have a specific role to play is necessarily exclusive to what a madrigal is.
What does this mean? Well, it all comes back to We Don't Talk About Bruno. See, in the song, she gets everyone to talk about Bruno and gets the Madrigal family to sing a polyphonic madrigal. And if all of these voices are singing independently, there is a very big chance people will sing at the wrong place or in the wrong key or out of tune. At the center of this madrigal choir, you need a conductor, someone who will keep time and keep everyone on the same page. In fact, keeping people in time is another connection Mirabel has with Bruno. Bruno's magical symbol is the hourglass, which measures time. And many of Bruno's predictions have to do with the change that time causes, like a fish dying of old age or a person's hair falling out from getting older. And so Mirabel is in charge of keeping track of time, but also keeping track of the change that time causes for the Madrigal family. And that's why Mirabel doesn't appear to have a gift. Think about it. An orchestra can be made up of more than 100 talented musicians, each one exceptionally gifted at their own particular instrument. But the musician with the greatest impact on the orchestra isn't someone who plays any instrument at all. It's the person who conducts, who keeps time, who is completely silent and yet is completely vital to the way all the gifted players come together to play in harmony. That's why Mirabel and Bruno are connected through their green color motifs. Bruno with his green clothes and eyes that turn green, and Mirabel with her green glasses, because green is traditionally a symbol of change, growth, new beginnings, and yes, harmony. That's
Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. So we've come back to it, right? This is what he's explaining why, like, seeing this as a madrigal is important, because Mirabel is acting like the conductor, right? She doesn't have a gift, but she conducts the people who do have the gift, just like you would conduct the people who have instruments, right? However, there's a caveat here. Traditionally, these madrigals were unconducted. In fact, there are choirs who the goal is to be able to sing some of this older polyphonic music without a conductor. Like, yes, having a conductor helps immensely. A lot of times you'll have a conductor for like a few rehearsals or whatever, but the goal is to get it to a point where you can sing it unconducted.
Sing we to that all men may know. Lying in a manger low, Savior and Redeemer, tender babe, God's only Son.
We tend to govern ourselves, and so we treat this like a string quartet would, that we're really four individual instruments working together. We're not choral, we're not looking to have that kind of like precision of a conductor in front of us. So it's a very organic experience.
So if madrigals are supposed to be a cappella, through composed, unconducted, right, all these different things, I don't see the connection between this song actually being a madrigal. Like I said, it would be so cool. I was like super excited when I heard him say that because I wanted him to prove it. I wanted it to be true. But all the evidence that he's given us actually points to it not being true. And then let's go a little tinfoil hat here for a second. He mentions that Mirabel's keeping time as the conductor, right? And that's why she has the green glasses, which tie in with Bruno's motif of green, right? Because he sees the future, which is time related. So he's trying to draw the connection there. But what if there's some other connection? Like, this is where I said I'm going to go completely off and speculate that the Casita originally gave Bruno his gift to become the conductor. Like, it thought, oh, if he can tell the future and tell people what they need to do, or, you know, what their outcomes are going to be in life, he can be the one who runs the Casita because he sees the future, right? What better person to run the organization than someone who can literally see what's going to happen to the Casita and to the people who live in it. However, everyone responded with fear to his predictions, and it could only see the negative things in his predictions, and so that failed. So instead, what the Casita realized is it needed another abuela, which he kind of goes on to talk about in a minute, how abuela is the conductor and is the one who doesn't have a gift, right? She just runs the house, runs all the people kind of inside of it, like a conductor of an orchestra or a choir, etc. And so then the Casita realizes, oh, we need another one of those, and then chooses Mirabel. And that's how they're connected, is that way. Okay, so to sum up my kind of completely, I mean, maybe someone else came to this conclusion already, I just haven't seen it. So as far as I know, my original take on this is that the Casita tried to make Bruno the leader because he could see the future, but that backfired. So the Casita then stuck to something that was kind of tried and true, which was having a family member with no gift, but can, bring the miracle to action, right? The miracle of all these gifts, and use those gifts in ways that help the people. So, I mean, there's lots of ways, right? Like, Bruno can see into the future. Mirabel can see into people and know kind of what they want, and get, like he said, to get them to talk about Bruno when they always said we don't talk about Bruno. And so like there are some other ways that you could look at this kind of green motif without relating it to this point of like time that he's trying to make.
Change. And the song We Don't Talk About Bruno perfectly encapsulates this villain, this idea of everyone resisting change. For one thing, everyone has a melodic idea where they know their own place, thus any change to their melody would make them out of place. Peppa's melody goes up and down just like her emotions.
It was my wedding day.
Felix is mostly there to echo and complement what Peppa is saying.
My wedding day.
Dolores sings in a quick patter song style because she's suffering from information overload and has to spit everything out at a rapid pace.
To live in fear when I'm stuttering or stumbling.
Also, she's going a little crazy because she's the only one who knows that Bruno's still there and is literally like creeping right above them. Camilo shapeshifts into caricatures of an evil, malevolent Bruno, which is why his melodic line slides with these sinister sounding half steps.
I've been fooled frame right so long is back.
Isabella's melody is a preview of her melody from What Else Can I Do?
Someday be mine. What else can I do?
Her melody is the only one accompanied in a major key, which symbolizes the fact that she's the only one with a positive prediction from Bruno. However, her melody still fits in with everyone else's in a minor key because Lin uses what's called the relative major, which is in essence a major key that coexists within a minor key. And the relative major is the perfect musical analogy for that perfect relative who seems to get all the positive attention.
Did someone say flowers?
But
Okay, so there are some other perspectives that we could kind of take away from this. So Camilo is representing the villain, right? Bruno. So he has these kind of slidey half steps. Bum, 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 ba, da, 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 da. However, I would say that kind of can represent a shapeshifter, right? It's like sliding. You don't really know what key we're in or where we're going to end up. So that could have a double meaning. It could be for the kind of the villain, or it could be for Camilo. He also says that Isabella's is the only one accompanied in a major key. And what he doesn't mention is how it kind of like bridges the gap between E flat major and C minor. Because she has this bum bum ba da 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 da. There's E flat, or relative, I may be not in the same key. But then it goes ba-dum. So it slides down to that relative minor pitch. So then, right, after this kind of like more ambiguous, are we in E flat or are we in C minor? I think it's a little bit ambiguous. When I first listened to it, I was still hearing the C as do, which meant that we weren't out of E flat yet. I think though, now I agree with his analysis, which says that we're in E flat major. The accompaniment becomes really sparse, right? There's like all those kind of pizzicato short sounds, and so it's harder to get a sense of the harmony. But after listening to it a few times, I agree that we're in E flat major. But that little drop there at the end, right, that kind of like hints at the C minor. We are definitely solid in E flat major when Dolores comes in and is singing about how her love was betrothed to another. So this is also something that he seems to kind of conveniently leave out, because his argument says that, oh, Dolores is speaking in this kind of like fast patter song because she has information overload and she's going crazy since she knows that Bruno is in the house, but she can't tell anybody. Another way to look at that is that the reason why she was speaking really softly and rapidly like that is because she was trying to whisper to Mirabel, right? We don't talk about Bruno. So, hey, come here. I want to tell you something. Hey, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, oh, I'm going to whisper to you and I'm going to say things really fast because I don't want anyone else to overhear. I don't want anyone else to come in, right? And realize that I was talking about Bruno. So that could explain that, which then wouldn't contradict with the fact that she gets this nice singing melody when she's talking about how her love is betrothed to another. That was her prophecy from Bruno. So like that's, something that we should have to contend with here. And, being solidly in E flat major when we're talking about love, even if it's like this kind of unrequited love, right? Love that she's never going to be able to have, like we're still singing about love. So then we get that really solid kind of like major sound. And then we get this transition back to our minor key to kind of wrap up the rest of the song.
Talk About Bruno, the song also has a practical purpose that allowed Lin to have all of these characters sing without having to give each of them their own song. You might notice that Louisa is not really part of this song, but again, she was already featured in the song Surface Pressure, so that's probably why she doesn't get a special verse here. Still, there's a lot of melodies to keep track of, but of course all these lines converge and sing together when they get together on the chorus on the words
He's here, don't talk about Bruno.
which is on the chords A flat major and G major. And even though they claim to be not talking about Bruno, the chord they use to sing Bruno's name specifically is G major, which is the most important chord in the entire song. It's so important that the melody of Bruno's name is actually a G7 chord being outlined. And that's important because this song is in C minor, meaning C minor is the song's home key. And in C minor, the most important chord other than C minor is G major, because according to music theory, G major functions as a kind of doorway back to C, back home. Remember, Bruno's name is sung using the notes of this G major chord, which means if you don't talk about Bruno, you are blocking the doorway. You are cutting yourself off from the way home and disrupting the flow of magic.
Okay, so his point here is that musically, they're singing Bruno's name on that G7 chord, which takes us back home, right? Which takes us back to our 1 chord. So his argument is by not talking about Bruno, you aren't getting that doorway, right? That kind of anticipation which the G7 brings. You aren't getting that kind of path to our home key. So he's saying that, oh, well, that's why we need to talk about Bruno, because he's kind of like the way home. However, I have, again, another interpretation of this. You could say that by not talking about Bruno, that is what's keeping everyone safe, because that is what the whole song has been about so far. The whole song is, oh, we don't talk about Bruno, because anytime Bruno showed up and, gave a prophecy, like it was something horrible. My fish died. I grew a gut. My hair fell out. It was all these negative things. So my argument, right, or at least my perspective kind of counter to what he's saying, would be that we don't talk about Bruno because that's how we keep the home safe. We don't talk about Bruno, no, G7, because that keeps our home, C minor, in the musical sense, safe. So, right, there's some different ways that you can look at this. And I actually was kind of surprised he talked about this, because I didn't think that it really added much to the video. And it's kind of an isolated example, right? So, I guess he was trying to tie more of the music in with the characters, but since there's, there are probably even more ways to look at it than what I just said. And so it's why he doesn't really give us an example of why his would be the best way. I think my perspective makes sense for the overall song, right? Like I said, people don't want to talk about Bruno, so we're going to put that fact. We don't talk about Bruno. We're going to put that on our dominant chord, so then we can keep our home chord, right? That can take us back home. We don't talk about Bruno. We just go home. We shove it under the rug, right? It's we don't talk about that. So that would be my argument. And whether or not you think his argument is stronger or mine is stronger, go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comments, and we can talk about it. Just don't talk about Bruno, right? Okay, so that does it for the commentary that I wanted to talk about. Now, I did skip quite a bit of the video, so when I do these reviews, I'm going to start linking the video in the description, so you can go and check out the video by yourself. I would say, overall, this video was great. I really enjoyed listening to it and watching it and taking some notes on it, and each pass through, I felt like I kind of got a little bit more out of the video, which is usually a good sign of a video. But I had some differing opinions on how the music was functioning in the video. So a lot of what he said, right, I really want to highlight some of the great things about the video. This idea of Abuela and Mirabel being conductors, right? They're the ones who are in charge. Their superpower is, or I should say their gift is the casita, right? Like Mirabelle can kind of understand the casita and is in sync with the casita and so on and so forth. And that was something that I didn't get when I first watched the movie. I thought for sure at the very end, Mirabelle would have some sort of gift bestowed upon her because she brought everyone together. So this was like, she proved herself finally. But now seeing what Howard Ho had to say, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. She's the next conductor. She gets to take the baton from Abuela and be the one who's in charge. And that's like, only one person gets to be in charge. So that's a really like special thing. So like, I really liked that information. I also liked his discussion. He talks a bit about like the names and who the true villain is and like this, that, and the other. And so he has a lot of the like storytelling and how the storytelling and the lyrics come together. I think all of that is also really good. And the kind of music analysis in general, showing you the different kind of isolations, right, of the different parts and visualizing it, having the keyboard, like that is all really nice and really helpful when you're watching and following along. Now, where I think the video could be improved is his entire argument that they are singing a madrigal at the end of We Don't Talk About Bruno. The evidence isn't there. He even seems to kind of know it, like I mentioned. Like, he calls it a modern madrigal. He points out the ways that it isn't a madrigal. And then it seems like his one supporting argument for that is that a choir of madrigal singers needs a conductor. So each person singing in the song is like a member of the choir, and then you need a conductor to lead that choir. But the problem is, like I mentioned, madrigals can be unconducted. I think traditionally we're unconducted. So that kind of throws a wrench into the argument. When, you could say the same thing, right? Like, oh, we need the leader, we need the conductor. You could say the same thing about like a team captain or coach, right? The coach doesn't go out and play the game. They sit and help the players win the game, right? So it could be also like a president or CEO or something, right? It doesn't have to be a conductor. And so since it doesn't have to be a conductor, since we don't really have the elements that make a madrigal, the main element being polyphony, which, like I said, we see in lots of different music and styles, then I think the idea of this song having any sort of connection to a madrigal, any sort of like support for the conductor, right? Which of course resonates with me really well because I'm a musician and have played in ensembles. So I was like, oh yeah, conductor, that makes complete sense. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it doesn't have to be a conductor, right? Like that coach model would work just as well. And so why conductor, right? He just hasn't convinced me that the whole madrigal conductor thing is actually there in this piece. Now, like I said before too, I really wanted this to be true. I thought that was so cool. Oh, the family madrigal. Like, wow, that's so cool, right? And I think probably a lot of other people who have watched this video would think the same, and are maybe, if you're watching my take on it, you're disappointed that I'm saying that's not true. And I'm just to let you know, like, I'm disappointed it's not true. But based on everything I've told you today, I think that's the conclusion I came to. Even though I really wanted it to be true, even though Howard Ho really wanted it to be true, I don't think you can call this part of the song a madrigal. That kind of end song where everyone's overlapping each other. All it is a kind of music theater technique that is common. I watched another guy who was reacting to this song, and he mentioned that I was like, oh yeah, that just comes right from music theater. Maybe we'll show a little bit of that here.
Yeah, like we were talking about earlier with the two different melodies. I mean, that's something that's relatively standard with musical theater because it's almost like it's their own thoughts and they're thinking their own thoughts at the same time. And that's kind of musically how we paint that picture of what's going on in the story.
Okay, so something that's relatively common in music theater, according to him. So yeah, that's the one part of the video, okay? Now, it's the one part of the video that I don't agree with. And like I said, the rest of the video, there's lots of great insights and other things to it. So like, nice job, Howard Ho. But I think this bit is the one that needs work. thank you all for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this because I think there's some ambiguity. Like, when do we really get into E flat major? Do you agree that that last section is truly a madrigal? Is there something that I missed that proves it's a madrigal, right? It's like, I'm totally open to hearing what your thoughts are on this. So please remember to like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon if you have some time. Thank you all for your support, and I'll see you next time.